Imagine your brand has 9 million brand ambassadors, but only 0.001% of them report into you. That is just one of the challenges for Laura Citron OBE, CEO at London's growth agency London & Partners. Laura joins me to discuss the strategic vision behind flagship brands, including Visit London and Grow London, and how together London & Partners are driving resilient, sustainable and inclusive economic growth in the UK capital. Find out how Laura and her team tackle the mammoth brand that is London, drawing on her global marketing experience from WPP and her passion for innovation to shape London into the ultimate destination for visitors, Londoners and brands. Welcome, Laura. Thanks very much for coming in. It's great to have you here. Normally with these podcasts, what we start off with is just to ask our guests, what is their background and how they ended up in their current roles. So if you could give us a few words, that would be great.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. It's a very good question that I sometimes ask myself because it's a very unusual role. So my job is to grow the London economy by winning investors, bringing in new tourists and events, growing small businesses, supporting innovation, which is one of those jobs that's amazing, but you don't really know exists when you're growing up. So I started out as an economist, really, worked in the public sector for a bit, worked in Brussels, worked in Moscow, and I eventually ended up working for WPP, where I worked for Martin Sorrell, supporting him as he travelled around the world, and then launched the global government and public sector business for WPP, which brought together in a client vertical all of our work for governments and NGOs around the world. Absolutely fascinating work. And then from there, about 8 years ago, I moved over to run London & Partners, which is where I am now. Yeah.
And that must have been a fascinating time, working with Martin Sorrell, because, the man needs no introduction.
He needs no introduction. It was an absolute privilege to spend a few years just travelling around with him, being in lots of meetings with him, supporting him. And I learned so much from Martin, and whilst, people all have different opinions about him, there is no denying he's an extraordinary entrepreneur. And people often asked him, what is the secret to your success? And he said, it's very simple. Be fast and make decisions. Be fast, Martin's famous for the fact that anyone can email him pretty much any time, day or night, any day of the year, and you will get a reply, usually within 90 seconds, maybe maximum 10 minutes. And people always say to me, it's you, isn't it? You're the one, you're actually the one doing the emails behind the scenes. I said, no, I'm genuinely not. He does it himself. Now, I do not in any way pretend to have Martin Sorrell levels of responsiveness. Please don't anyone send me an email and test that. But I did learn from him the importance of speed and taking decisions, because I think what people often look for in a leader is just make a decision and then, really importantly, make a decision and take the flak if it turns out to be the wrong decision. Because uncertainty is the absolute killer. Everything grinds to a halt. What people want is, let me just get on and deliver something and know that you've got my back if it turns out to be the wrong strategic call. And Martin was very good at making decisions quickly.
Which, as you say, sort of it is not, you would think it would be an absolute sine qua non for a CEO. Not the case. Actually, there are many CEOs out there that I can think of personally who don't necessarily have that speed.
Don't have the speed and like to wait for perfect information.
Yeah.
And I think you can get into a bit of what they call paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
Of course, there are many other things that are important about leadership that I perhaps didn't learn from Martin, but from other leaders that I've worked with. But I certainly did take some really important lessons from my time with Martin.
And when you came over to London & Partners, obviously it's a different environment from WPP. What were some of those lessons that you actually brought across?
I think for me, the two big lessons I brought from WPP were about an international audience-centric outlook and then client service.
Yep.
So it was very easy when you're promoting a city, or in any brand, to be honest, to think that your brand is the centre of the world. And when you're lucky enough to work on a really big brand like London, it's particularly dangerous to think that your brand is the centre of the world and top of mind for everyone all the time. And I think you can assume a lot more awareness and understanding than there actually is. And so one of the things I've really tried to always do is to think about London from the outside, not always only from the inside. And very early on, we did some market research, some perceptions work with our top international target audiences about what they knew about London, how they felt about London. And one of the things that really struck me from that was that with audiences in China, these are investor and student and tourist audiences, so educated middle class audiences. When you ask them to sort of name some of the highlight features or the skyline of London, quite a lot of people thought the Eiffel Tower was in London. Now, we think that's hilarious. How can you think the Eiffel Tower is in London? But then if I showed you a picture of the Beijing, Shanghai and Tokyo skylines, could you tell me which was which?
Probably Shanghai. Depends where you do in each of those cities.
Right. But it's not that obvious, is it?
Okay, it's not that obvious, but yeah.
It's not that obvious. And throw in Shenzhen as well. It's not that obvious. And you think, well, why should someone in China or indeed in Japan be any more familiar with the difference between London and Paris than we are between the difference between major cities in that part of the world? It's really far away and it's not very relevant day to day. And so I think I've tried to keep bringing that sense of how is the rest of the world thinking about us, and are they thinking about us at all? So that's one aspect. And then the other is just client service. And, being in any client service, professional services business, that is so drummed into you, client service, who owns the client is always in charge. And you go into the public sector or the pseudo-public sector where I am, which is we're actually a social enterprise. And I didn't necessarily find that same really keen sense of client service that I was used to.
Okay.
And that's something that I've really brought in. And, we've gone from a position where, some of our audiences had net promoter scores well into the minus numbers, to today where for our inward investors to London that we support at every stage of their inward investment journey, we've got net promoter scores in the 80s on that. And that's because we've brought those just client service, account management, relationship management principles into a world where that discipline doesn't always get applied.
Yeah.
And that's made a really big difference.
Yeah. And you've touched on actually what I was going to ask next, which is obviously given the role of London Partners, it's pretty unique sort of on there. And again, the sort of, I guess in a way you could say the challenges and also as well the opportunities when you're working with a brand like London.
If we think about London as a brand, the challenges in many ways, it's huge. It's such a recognisable brand. It has such high awareness. And as anyone who manages a big brand will know, shifting perceptions of a big brand is very, very expensive. And we have teeny weeny budgets. And so the challenge is, how do we use the incredible soft power that London has? London is so influential. How do we use that power as opposed to a more blunt instrument of media spend to try to shift perceptions of London? And part of that is being really targeted so that we use our resources and our energy where it's going to make the biggest difference. So for us, for example, one of our important target audiences is high growth tech companies internationally that are expanding, thinking about bringing them into London. And in any given year, we land between 100 and 200 new tech companies from around the world into London, and we convince them to come, and then we support them into the city through really intensive account management.
So Laura, want to actually ask, because with the sort of London and Partners, the audience that you're reaching, as you say, pretty much global, and that obviously brings its own challenges when it comes to how you reach those audiences. So could you just give a brief sort of outline of the various platforms you use, sort of as anything in particular that you think sort of as strengths, sort of any of those, and how you really think about it?
So London obviously has really diverse global audiences. So we use different channels in very different ways. When we're targeting international investors, so we're typically looking for high growth companies and mostly in technology, innovation led, that are just starting to think about expanding internationally. We tend to reach those mostly through networks, but we do also use some very targeted performance marketing, and sometimes we'll be at trade shows and events to reach those audiences because they're small in number and you're really looking for that needle in a haystack. When we're looking at our tourist audiences, that's obviously very different. Those are large scale consumer audiences. So we're using our organic channels, and we're across web obviously, but we have big organic social channels, and we're using them to engage those audiences. And when we have budgets, also large media campaigns like the Let's Do London campaign, for example. But obviously the platforms for those vary by market, and in China we're on the specialist, we're obviously on Chinese social media, so looking different platforms for different places. But we also have really important London audiences because we support small businesses, and we particularly support small businesses who are typically excluded from getting support.
Okay.
And so we reach those by working really at a grassroots level with local communities through community outreach. Lots of very local social things like Nextdoor and local press and radio. But also we use out of home with those audiences because it builds a sense of trust. Because we're present on the high street where businesses are, when they then meet one of our advisors or somebody gets in touch with them, there's a sense of, oh yes, no, I know you're actually reputable. I've seen your brand. I've seen it. I saw your poster on the high street nearby. And we find that particularly where we're working with communities where there hasn't necessarily been that historic trust, and perhaps they've been approached in the past and haven't been really, the support they've had hasn't really done what they thought it was going to do. That trust building has been very important. So whole range of different channels for the very wide range of audiences that we serve.
I mean, I like that sort of point about the whole, you don't have unlimited budget, and yet you've got a sort of brand here that has built up its brand over centuries, let's say, on there, and the ability to sort of shift perceptions sort of on limited budget, that you have to think in different ways.
And I sometimes say that I feel like that the CMO of a brand that has like maybe 9 million people in its marketing department, but none of them actually report to me. And what do you do with that? And so a lot of our work is about convening and coordinating. It's about shaping the narrative and saying, guys, this is the story that we're all going to go and tell about London. And then coordinating and encouraging and championing and convening all those people and brands and organisations that speak for the city and that have audiences to go and tell the story in their voice to their audiences. Now, it's not just, as it were, London as a brand, but it's also as well London as a destination, sort of for many brands. I mean, as you said, 9 million people sort of altogether. When sort of brands, what would the message you would give to brands sort of when they're looking about London and thinking about sort of how they should pitch their message to the population? London's a really big, important and popular market for many brands for obvious reasons. It's big, it's affluent, but also Londoners tend to be very early adopters. Londoners love new things. We work with lots of consumer tech companies who choose London for a launch over a lot of other cities because they feel that that Londoners tend to be quite open-minded. They love something new. They love trying something out. We tend to work with brands when they want to really make an impact across the city and use London as their canvas or use London as their playground. And often the reason they want to do that is that they want to associate with London's values. So when brands want to come and make a statement that says, I'm optimistic about the future, I'm inclusive, I'm open-minded, I think diversity is a good thing. That's when they want to use London and be proximate to London and use and sort of lean on London's brand values. So we work with brands when they want to do things that are more unusual. It's not difficult to come into London and work with fantastic organisations like JCDecaux and others to do London. But if you really want to get into the DNA of the city and be part of the city, that's where we help, because what we do is connect brands with really unusual opportunities that they wouldn't usually have.
Yeah.
So, for example, we worked with the team behind the launch of Barbie the movie, and they basically came and said, we want to turn the city pink. What have you got that we can make it pink? And so we work with them on things like getting the London Eye lit up and the BT Tower. And, we work with brands that want to do fan zones, that want to work with local communities, that want to find really unusual, quirky out of home that you couldn't normally get access to, that say, I want to do the big festival, but I need to close some roads. How do I go about doing that? Those are the kinds of brands that we tend to work with when they're really saying, I want to be of the city. How do I become part of London in a way that's different and surprising and unique?
And obviously you have, very close links with the Mayor of London's office and City of London as well. And presumably for that, what you just mentioned there, presumably being able to sort of bring in that help on the government side is also quite critical as well.
Absolutely. Big part of our offer is being those connectors who know who to talk to and can do those warm introductions. So whether it's that you need to work with someone in the mayor's team, or might be the local authority, it might be that you want to do street furniture or street dressing, and we know who you need to talk to about that, if it's the landlord, or you want to work with Transport for London on sponsoring the cable car, or for example, Barbie did the name change at Barbican. They renamed it as Barbie Ken Station. TfL, fantastic team for those kinds of activations. So it's plugging people into all those different places and knowing those quirky, unique things. People come to us and say, I want to do a fashion show, but I want to do it in a field. But it needs to be in central London, things like that. And we have a brilliant team who have the most amazing contacts and knowledge of London inside out, and we can plug them in.
I mean, the name, London and Partners. Obviously the partners sort of also an important part. And we touched upon it in the sort of question where we said, you talked about the role, the interaction between yourself and government. But can you just walk us through sort of in terms of the partners, sort of how that operates, sort of on a day-to-day basis, what it brings, and the advantages that it gives?
So it's in our name, and it really is part of our core operating model, which is that whilst we're partly funded by grants from the mayor, so by taxpayers, we also are very much a public-private business, and we work with London businesses to grow the London economy. We work with literally hundreds of London businesses in quite different ways. So, for example, we work a lot with tourism businesses, hotels, airports, big visitor destinations and attractions, the large venues like Wembley or Excel or the Barbican. And what we're doing with them is curating the London offer, shaping that story and telling it with them, but also going out and doing some of the heavy lifting business development work. So we're going with them to win big events for London. So when, for example, we bring in the NFL, the American football, or the baseball, or the basketball into London, often we've been involved behind the scenes in putting together the bid. When a big conference comes into the XL, like a big trade show comes into XL and it's going to have 20,000 delegates, well, they need 20,000 hotel rooms. And that's probably dozens of hotels that have had to get together to bid to host all of those delegates. So we're behind the scenes working, coordinating with them the bids that we put in, and it's competitive against other cities to get those things here. But we also work with businesses that support London's tech and innovation communities. And we work with them to build our innovation ecosystems, to support entrepreneurs and to support investors when they come into the market. So it might be that we work with businesses, for example, lawyers and accountants that really specialise in working with tech startups and can give them the very specialist support that they need. But it might also be businesses like JCDecaux that we work with who really are very heavily invested in helping scale up businesses, particularly really exciting new consumer businesses to reach those audiences. And so we working with them to make sure that we're really working as a team London to help a business to scale. So we work with businesses of all sorts. As I said, from the kind of tourism end to technology businesses, to big banks, to businesses like JCDecaux, lots of property developers and landlords are our partners. Yeah. Anyone who's invested in London's success, if London being successful helps your business to be successful, you should think about
should think about
it. Yes,
that's a great way to think about it, actually. Indeed. And yeah, obviously, because all our audience may not have heard about it, but it has gained quite a lot of attention. The London Growth Plan. If you could just give sort of a couple of lines just in terms of the key points of that.
So London published its growth plan about 6 weeks ago. And it's our 10-year strategy for the London economy. It's basically saying, where do we want the London economy to go in the next 10 years? And it's published by the mayor and all the boroughs, but it's very much London's plan. And thousands of businesses and different kinds of organisations were involved in shaping it, universities and colleges and trade unions and all sorts. So it's really London's plan that says, where do we want to go? And it looks at what are the big sectors where the London economy is going to grow, and what are the places in London where we're going to see growth and where we want to shape growth. Yeah. And I think for this conversation, one of the things that's really interesting, other than the fact that the creative industries is obviously a global strength and will continue to be a global strength, is that it picks out the experience economy as a strength for London. And by the experience economy, we mean consumers spending money having an experience that's more than just functional. So it's about retail and leisure and hospitality and events and immersive experiences and culture. And it's for Londoners, and it's for UK visitors, and it's for our international visitors. So we don't just call it tourism because it's not just about tourists. It's also about us Londoners and how we experience the city every day. And what we've seen, and I think this is, marketers will be well aware, this shift from consuming things to consuming experiences and how important that is. So a big part of our role is shaping the London experience with our partners across the city. And it was lovely that this year we were named best city in the world by TripAdvisor, as in literally TripAdvisor users say that the experience of London is the best in the world. And that's an incredible starting place. So we start from a great place, but we're also very aware that we have to keep evolving the offer. We have to keep bringing in the most exciting new experiences, new brands, new things to do, make the experience of getting around London and navigating it as pleasant as it can be, making the most of our green spaces. So it's really somewhere that people want to spend time and they want to be. And I think out of home actually has an important role to play in that, because it's a very important part of how we experience place and how we understand where we are. And that's why I think this industry in particular is a really important partner to us as we think about the role of places and destinations within London.
Yeah, and it is, after all, this is a JCDecaux podcast. So, I mean, that point about out of home being such an important medium to reach people that, quite frankly, you wouldn't be able to reach in other ways.
It's the fact you wouldn't be able to reach them, but it's also that it's a shared experience. And pretty much all other media forms are individual experiences. And what we know is that what do people value about a real life experience? It's the fact that you do it in a group. That sense of, walking down Carnaby Street when it's really busy, or being in a crowd at a gig, or having your picnic in Hyde Park on a busy, sunny, buzzy day. It wouldn't be the same if it was empty. It wouldn't be the same if you were on your own.
True.
And that's where out of home comes in, because as you see it, that everybody else is seeing it too. And that sense of connection, that sense of that shared experience is really what we're often trying to create in London. And that's what's really exciting about it. People come up from all over the world to be part of the city. And that's different from other cities where people go more to look at something. People might go there, more museum cities. People go there to admire some fantastic building or to walk around a gallery and look at a piece of art. But then they probably just sort of go back to their hotel and go for dinner. People come to London to be in London, to experience it, to walk around, to explore all our villages and neighbourhoods. And one of the things that we talk about in the growth plan is the importance of all these different villages and destinations around London, because we know that international visitors that spend time not just in our bucket list attractions, but that go and they spend half a day, whether it's in Brixton or in Walthamstow or in Borough Market, or they go to Hampton Court, they have such a different and better experience of the city, and people are looking for that authenticity and that sense of, I want to come and live like a Londoner. I want to see the places where Londoners live. And so we're really working with the people who curate those local places to elevate those offers and make sure that they're fantastic.
Now, come to the final question, and we always do this, which is, if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody who is in marketing from your experience, and it's been across the board, what would you say?
Any marketer in London who isn't thinking about diversity should probably be taking a very long, hard look at themselves. And I think it's quite intuitive. I think most London marketers do think about that now. But it is such an important part of our city. And you can't be a brand in London if you don't understand London's demographics and what makes people tick, and how it's very different to other parts of the UK and to other global cities. And that's something that we sometimes work with international brands on as they enter the market for the first time, depending where in the world they're coming from, understanding how to think about London's different communities is an important part of it.
Laura, thank you so much. That's been great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura, for joining me to delve into the complexities of marketing a city as vibrant as London and how you leverage strategic partnerships to drive the city's growth and global appeal. If there is anything you'd like to ask us or hear more about, you can visit the JCDecaux Marketing Hub online. We hope you enjoyed listening, and wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.